all sorts of tea about what's going on inside Washington, D.C., what regulators and lawmakers are thinking and working on, and what you and your credit union should be focused on in terms of risk areas and areas of opportunity. I'm your host, Ann Petros, also NAFCU's Vice President of Regulatory Affairs, and today I am joined by two very exciting guests, Cathie Mahon, President and CEO of Inclusiv, and Creighton Blackwell, Chief Community and Public Affairs Officer at Coastal Credit Union. Both of my guests today are experts on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, a new program being implemented by the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, and that is the subject of our discussion today. So thank you, Cathie and Creighton, for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
All right.
Thank you, Ann.
Yeah, very excited. So let's get started. We've got a lot to talk about, and I know that this is a topic that we could spend days talking about. Cathie, I want to start with the basics with you. What is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund?
Yeah, thank you, Ann. And thank you for having me on the podcast this morning. I'm so excited to talk about this topic and what it can mean for credit unions. So the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is a fund that was part of the broader Inflation Reduction Act that was passed last year. And the goals of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is really to be directing capital and investing in clean energy projects around the country that would not otherwise be financed. The primary goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and there's some big goals and metrics that the legislation sets out for that. But also, as part of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, there's a goal to advance equity, so to ensure that clean energy and greening, green projects are invested in, particularly in communities that have historically been the most disadvantaged by environmental policy. So the communities that have some of the poorest air quality and kind of the greatest challenges with pollution. So it really is intended to make sure that capital flows, but that it flows to projects that are going to be addressing and most investing in communities that have been historically had some of the greatest challenges with air quality and pollution. Mm-hmm. It also has a goal of leveraging private sector capital and trying to create a long-term sustainable entity that will, for years to come, be able to continue to invest in ongoing clean and green projects.
Excellent. And what was the impetus to pass this as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, and how involved were you and Inclusiv in that process?
Yeah, so we got involved very early on, and we had been working on passing what became the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund as independent legislation back during the height of the pandemic in 2020, and then in 2021. We had been working on this initiative along with the offices of Senator Markey and Senator Van Hollen, who were sort of the Senate sponsor leads on this. At the time, it was called the Clean Energy Sustainability Accelerator. And originally, it was sort of a standalone bill that was looking at how to create kind of a national entity that would invest in clean and green projects around the country.
Oh, fantastic. So can you describe some of the work that Inclusiv is already doing in this space? Green lending, climate resiliency, things of that nature.
Absolutely. So Inclusiv has been, starting in October of 2019, we launched something called the Center for Resiliency and Clean Energy. And through that center, we have really driven a really broad-based agenda to try to support the community development credit union movement, the CDFI movement, and community-based lenders all across the country to be able to adopt green products and be able to drive capital in their communities to be sort of keeping invested in and connected to a greening economy. So we launched what we call the Solar Finance Training Program, along with the University of New Hampshire, which has at this point provided training to about 300 community development lenders around the country, and we're continuing to do that. We have 2 or 3 classes each year. We run a class on consumer solar finance and commercial finance. So our goal has really been to sort of build the capacity of our own field, and in the credit union movement to really build the capacity of credit unions to be developing green products, investing in opportunities in their own local communities, and now to be able to be ready to draw on some of this capital that's coming our way.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great segue into a question for Creighton. Why are credit unions and CDFIs such a natural fit to help disperse the funds from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund?
Thank you for that question. And once again, thank you. We appreciate the time to be here, and also to appreciate such partners that we have with Cathie and Inclusiv. So important to the movement, as you're already hearing there, and many of us already know and continue to that. So once again, just a thank you. I think it's a very easy answer. If you look at not just the purpose, if you not just look at what we do every day from a credit union standpoint, what other perfect organization that can get lending and impact on the ground directly to people who need it the most. It's so written in our mission. It's so written in all of our standards, our principles, our philosophies. When we look at the fact that coming through this, we have disbursement channels. We have the ability to reach individuals, our membership, communities from every level of lending, every level of their financial service, every level of community development, every piece that we heard Cathie just mention about why these dollars are coming the way they were and they're created. Well, credit unions have been doing that. They've been able to reach into those communities, create different products, have the flexibility, the adaptability to find the need for their community, for their membership, and shape it around there. When we talk about green and we're defining the importance of green, this is a perfect place for us to once again continue to adapt, figure out what are those specific things, those specific ways that greenhouse reduction can now better homes, better communities, better individuals, better families. All of those conveniences, those connections, this is what we continue to always stress from a credit union purpose, and how this movement, how our partners, how everyone comes back into saying this is impact. And no better organization, no better movement than credit unions are created to be able to really fulfill this.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, credit unions are already on the ground in their communities, always have, members top of mind, unlike some other financial institutions out there. So, what concerns do you have about other entities, including, let's say, green banks, receiving, the bulk of the funding? What might that mean?
One of the biggest concerns I always go back to is that lack of on the ground connection. When we continue to talk about the fact that we lend, we talk, we help, we are there with members from every piece of the loan, from every piece of their financial life, and all the connections that add to it. We have the ability to make that loan. We have the ability to have that conversation. We have the ability to partner with people who can bring that education, bring those things directly to them. We don't need an intermediary. We are that direct conduit. Many of these other institutions, while having positive intent, lack that structure. They lack the ability to actually be able to go directly to their communities, to their member, to that direct individual, and be able to have that way of shaping it in a way that will positively impact them. They lack those connections. They lack the ability in many cases to even have the partnerships that has where we can have an Inclusiv sitting here on this podcast today, speaking from the same lens of how do we help and how do we impact. Many don't have the same infrastructure and the same types of partners across the community, across the country that the credit unions can put together. Many of those, they lack that. And what we don't want to happen with such a grand opportunity to impact people is it goes into places where now it falls into those traps where monies and different resources stay, we talked about on the ground, stay in the air.
Mm-hmm.
That's if it gets trapped there and gets trapped in those types of different projects, those types of different type bureaucracies, it doesn't help the people we need to help.
Mm-hmm. So when you say getting trapped in the air, you mean getting, stuck in the process of, let's say, working with Wall Street investors and capital to try to get this money to where it needs to be. But even though there's a lot of money there, it makes the process more cumbersome.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And the more complex that you make the process, there's people in need right now.
That's right.
The monies and the resources that this can bring could impact a family this morning. Mm-hmm. Some of this, when you get lost in the process, now it might be months on end because you have to keep creating the different levels to make sure it happens in the most efficient way. Well, we already have those structures. Mm-hmm. Those structures have been built. Those partnerships have been built from credit unions to be able to move past those things. Let us be able to help you help them. That's the structure of what we have built. And when other entities don't have those same types of structures, it's now not going to help the people as quick or as fast, and in some cases at all, that we really know needs this type of help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, especially those low income and disadvantaged communities maybe can't afford to wait that long.
That's right.
Right. Need it now. What does credit union green lending currently look like? And, how would additional monies from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund help credit unions to better serve their members and communities? What would change?
Well, and if you look across the board, there's a different variety of different credit union types of products that you're seeing today. You're seeing from EV lending for being able to have lending for certain types of electronic vehicles. You're seeing mm-hmm. things of that nature. You are seeing some housing, affordable housing pieces that are worked where you're making sure the upfits of that it's going to be a little bit better. You are seeing, in some cases, even some solar panel type lending. You're seeing that gambit of different things. But what changes now, and I think it changes especially based off of the needs that we're now hearing even more from our members and communities. Because what changes now is the ability to now spread out. And now, what about HVACs? Mm-hmm. What about, and we're hearing directly now from communities that are openly saying, we have individuals who need an HVAC loan because they have HVACs. They have air conditioning, heating units that are 40, 50 years old.
Wow. That
they are now paying, in many cases, $200 to $300 a month extra if they did not have the lending and an organization that could help lend them money to now upgrade mm-hmm. that unit. Now, think about those members that across the country that $100 to $200 to $300 a month. Think about that impact that you can have on their life.
Right. Yeah.
And putting that money back into their monthly budget. Those type of changes now expands all of our capabilities to now build these types of products to a point where it can now not just be in a commodity type place, not just be where it's only here and there. It could be the types of things that, as we continue to partner with great people like Inclusiv, and we lean on much of that guidance, and great partners as NAFCUPP, and we continue to lean on it, now we can build so many other types of products that directly now aims at that. And while we're doing this, we're really redefining what many people think green is, because it's not just the large solar farms. No, we are talking about the $100 to $200 that you could save with now doing an HVAC loan for that family that truly needs it. We're now changing with this, can change all of this definition of what green really means and how green can be something that truly is a place where credit unions can play and have even more impact in the many cases that we've even thought about before.
Wow. So yeah, it sounds like the impacts are really broad and potentially going beyond just, the green lending, the energy efficiency lending. But when you expand, members' ability to afford other expenses, you add to their budget, then, anything is possible. Yes. Really. And that provides opportunities for credit unions to provide even more assistance to those communities. Great. So question for both of you. What are some issues that still need to be resolved with the design and implementation of the fund? We know that the EPA recently put out an implementation framework, but I think that maybe, created more questions than it answered. It answered a few. We know that there are going to be multiple recipients. It's not just going to be, a single recipient, which I think we were all pleased to see, but there are still some uncertainties. Can you describe, what those are? Cathie, let's start with you.
Yeah, happily. So Anne, the legislation for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund had sort of two pots of funding. One was $7 billion. So total funding was $27 billion. $7 billion right off the top was to go to state and local governments to be able to implement green financing projects in their states. And then the $20 billion was remaining for kind of to finance green lending across the country. So when the EPA released their initial framework, they have now created sort of three different sort of buckets or competitions, as they call it. There's a $14 billion National Clean Investment Fund competition, and that is intending to fund 2 to 3 national nonprofits that then will partner with private sector capital or will leverage private sector capital to deliver financing at scale to businesses, communities, and community lenders around the country. There's a $6 billion what they're calling the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator competition. And in that competition, they expect to make about anywhere between 2 and 7 grants to sort of large national nonprofits to then be able to capitalize and get capital out to be able to build the capacity of on-the-ground lenders. And then, of course, the third competition is that $7 billion Solar for All competition, which goes to state and local governments. So what we're really looking at for the credit union sector is there's sort of two opportunities in that framework. One is to be able to draw capital under the accelerator competition, the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. That would be able to then provide kind of grant funding and sort of soft capital is the way I think about it, that will build the capacity of on-the-ground lenders. The other competition, and once those sort of on-the-ground lenders have their capacity built, they can then also access the National Clean Investment Fund to be able to draw capital for specific financing projects or products. So there's a couple of different ways that credit unions are going to be able to benefit from this. I think first and foremost, that accelerator will get immediate dollars flowing to sort of build the balance sheet and build the on the ground capacity. But the really long-term sustainable source of capital is going to be in that National Clean Investment Fund. And that's really going to be an opportunity for credit unions to be able to, over the long haul, to hopefully be able to be drawing capital that is able to then finance the kinds of products that Creighton was talking so much about, which is everything from the smallest of small loans to replace an appliance to be more energy efficient, all the way up to kind of larger scale community financing activities.
And what are some of the issues that you think still have to be resolved by the EPA? I mean, Inclusiv has submitted a number of comment letters on this process. Do you think the EPA will be receptive and responsive to those concerns?
I'm hopeful that they'll be responsive to the concerns we've raised. The structure, I think we were a little bit thrown initially by the creation of those two separate competitions within the $20 billion pot that was intended to go out to capitalize on the ground lending capabilities. There's a couple of really important components to it. One is credit unions are not able to be eligible applicants or recipients for either competition directly. So we have to be working in collaboration, and we have to be drawing upon kind of the collective capabilities in the credit union movement of intermediaries to be able to draw that capital. But one of the things that we have sought clarification on, and the guidance was very broad, but we fully see credit unions as active participants in both competitions, both being able to draw dollars from the accelerator to build their capacity as lenders, but also to be able to draw capital from some of those award recipients under the National Clean Investment Fund, not just to be providing projects up to a large national bank, green bank, but instead to be drawing that capital so that they can be doing the financing that they need to do directly in their communities. So we've asked for a lot of clarification around that to the EPA. We really expect to see that in the National Clean Investment Fund, credit unions should be able to draw capital from those funds, those awardees, to be able to do their own lending the way they want to do it. And again, to emphasize Creighton's point, every credit union designs their products not based on what some national entity is telling them to do, but based on what they're seeing as the on-the-ground need in their communities. So we need the maximum flexibility of the community lenders to be able to design those products exactly as Creighton talked about, and to do it that is immediately responsible to those needs on the ground and draw the capital to be able to grow and scale those products. So we've been looking for a lot of clarification to make sure that lending, the structure of the products is driven by the design on the ground, not the design in the air, so to speak.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we definitely want credit unions and CDFIs to be able to directly access the funds through, their nonprofit partners and not have to be sort of second tier in this whole process. Creighton, same question to you. Are there any issues that Cathie hasn't mentioned that still remain to be resolved through the EPA's guidance? Any additional information that you think we need to have? And do you think the EPA is going to be responsive?
Well, Cathie hit the majority of, I think, the major concerns, and it does come back to just more clarification. Mm-hmm. It comes back to more eligibility. Mm. Eligibility was one of the key points from the beginning of this conversation when we knew these funds were coming out as to who was going to be eligible, what types of partnerships, what types of things were going to be able to happen. Because we saw that one of the first things that first came out was it said non-depository institutions were not going to be eligible to be able to do that. So how can we then be able to play into either one of these pots? There's still some eligibility questions that still needs to be answered and clarification. as we continue to go there before we get to some of the grant cycles and the things that will be coming up very soon.
Mhm.
I will like to speak to one point, especially that Cathie was making, is about one of the ways we tried to figure that out early on was the creation of a nonprofit named Accordi. And Accordi is, when Cathie spoke to that intermediary, Accordi is a nonprofit intermediary that has been created as a intermediary, a lending solution, a structure to be able to help partner and scale these types of funds for credit unions, for CDFIs, for our partners here, as a way to make sure that eligibility does not escape the credit unions. And that has been something that has been hard work from the beginning of this and thank you to multiple people here. Steve Hennigan was a flagship and really leading this. A special thank you to Steve. Cathie has been part of all of these conversations. Thank you once again for Inclusiv in helping to walk this out, because we knew we needed that conduit, that nonprofit entity that will be able to now have that partnership. And a special thank you to, once again, NAFQ, who's been part of every one of those discussions and have that same partnership, because this is how we define the eligibility question and try to put that to the side for credit unions. For every reason that we said we needed to be here, that was a strategic piece that we had to know we had to do from the absolute beginning of this. So that group's now in existence. Accordi is there, and it is there to be able to be that official eligible applicant that many, as we're sitting here discussing, are having problems trying to figure out the clarification of things.
Right.
That answer actually happened with Accordi. So a special thank you once again to all of this group, NAFQ, and the work that NAFQ has done in this, and once again Cathie, to help Accordi now build. And now we get to build to the next levels of this, while many other organizations that are looking for these same dollars do not have that same opportunity and that same structure right now. It places us in a different place. That is right now a very exciting place for us to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is definitely very exciting for our viewers and listeners. There is a vehicle for you. There is a home for you in this process. Accordi is that vehicle through which you may be able to access some of this funding. So if you're interested in learning more, if you're interested in being a part of this process and obtaining, part of this grant funding to provide green lending products to your communities, Accordi could be that partner that you're looking for. So more to come there, I'm sure, but definitely, big thanks again to you, to Cathie, and Steve, of course, and all the work that you've put in and putting that together. All right, my next question, again, to both of you, what should credit unions be thinking about when it comes to climate change broadly and the role that the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund will play in reducing emissions long term? Why is it important to start having these conversations about the impacts of climate change and making action plans with your credit union management and boards of directors now, sooner rather than later? Cathie?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say, I think initially credit unions kind of look at, some of the climate change and the opportunities around green lending and kind of think like, I'm not sure that that's right for my community. That might take me away from my core mission of just sort of getting, good, responsible loans and services out in my community. The truth of the matter is that it's not necessarily a redirect of what you're already doing. And we like to think about when you're thinking about climate change and addressing climate change in your credit union, it's really about thinking about a kind of a new lens to put across all of your products and services, right? So if you're really focused on getting people into affordable homes and being able to be homeowners and be able to benefit from home ownership, then green products that help you those homes be more energy efficient, to reduce the utility bills, to be able to think about generating solar so that you're more resilient if the grid goes down, or you're out in the midst of a climate event and you need to be able to be self-sustaining. We could be thinking about kind of, to Creighton's point around electric vehicles. If you do a tremendous amount of auto lending, this is a great opportunity. As price points start coming down for electric vehicles, we can be getting a lot of people into new types of vehicles that are going to be much better on the household budget in the long run, that you're not having to pay all kinds of their income towards, fueling up the car every week. But rather could be benefiting from, the opportunities available through electric vehicles. So in a lot of ways, it's about thinking about what you do, where your, sweet spot is as a credit union, and then thinking about how do you introduce the types of products that in the long run are good for the climate, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also are good for the household budget, because that's where the sort of that sweet spot works. That's the intersection that credit unions do best in. And I think that's going to be sort of a real opportunity. Why should the benefits of a greening economy go to people who are not our members of our credit unions, right? We need to be able to get these advantages and these benefits to our members now. So it's a great time to kind of plug into the conversation. We have great training programs. We have great support systems in place. We have great partners like Ecority and NAFCU who are sort of building the awareness and the support and the opportunities to plug in. So it's a good time to plug in, and we're all here to support your credit union.
Creighton, same question to you. Why is it important to start thinking about, climate change, reducing emissions long term, talking to your management team, your boards of directors? Why now?
I'm going to challenge us and use a term that is thrown around quite a bit, especially today, which is financial well-being. And we discuss how our mission, our purpose, our principles, our philosophies, everything that drives us as not-for-profit financial or member-owned institutions, we will always come back to these values. Well, financial well-being, as one of those things that we say we want to make sure those values is helping for our membership, tells me this phrase: there's no such thing as not in our lane if it helps promote financial well-being for our membership. And in many cases, we can fall into the trap of saying, and Cathie said this so well, that's not our lane. Green energy may not be our lane. But if it positively impacts our member and can help their financial well-being, and we've talked about the examples through this conversation of how it can put money in their pockets, how it could better living environments, which allows that, because now you're connecting it to the other decisions that every family, every member have to make about their budget. It all connects. Bettering our community, all of these things still connects. So it's hard for me to hear that and then say, but that's not in our lane. I think part of us as credit unions that we have to be able to challenge ourselves in saying, so here's the connection. The entire definition of what we're saying from a greenhouse gas reduction and what this fund is doing. Once again, if you read behind what's really trying to impact it, it's in our lane. If you hear about the products and we're trying to create, it's in our lane. Everything that Cathie is mentioning and what Inclusiv had done such a great job of leading us through is in our lane. Everything that NAFCU is walking through and why we are partnered here and having this conversation and why it connects to every other conversation, every other topic that we talk about in the promotion of our membership, in the promotion of their lives. It all connects. So why now? Why not now? Because this is a great time with great opportunity for us to continue to redefine how we help people, not from an anecdotal standpoint, but tangibly defining how we help people, how financial well-being is something at the core of what we do, how our partnerships continue to reinforce that every day. That is our lane.
All right. Yeah. It sounds like we've really come full circle in this conversation. Any parting remarks, anything else that our viewers and listeners should be aware of when it comes to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and what this means for climate change in their institutions? Cathie?
Yeah, I'll just say, I think we're in a moment, and the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is a tremendous amount of resources. For years we've been working to drive capital to the credit unions through the CDFI fund. That appropriation is $250 million every year. It's $225 million, more or less each year. We now have the opportunity to be drawing exponential amounts of resources to our communities by taking advantage of this moment. So I really feel like we're going to look back in 10 years and say, like, this is the moment where our movement transformed into being kind of the source of capital that built a green economy that was fair, that was equitable, that is owned by all, that is controlled and directed by the community that's being served. And I feel like this is a great moment for credit unions. It's a great moment for us to plug in. So I'm just excited for the opportunities ahead and look forward to the continued work together with allies like NAFCU and Cordy and the whole network of credit unions around the country.
Creighton?
Yeah, I would simply like to add to that great response. We also would continue to learn. Mm-hmm. We would also continue, there would be more information that would continue to be laid out about the fund, that would be laid out about the processes. And that is something that this group is so excited to have to do. Because we have to be able to translate that to everyone else so that we can all understand all of what Cathie just said, all of these opportunities that right now credit unions have. These are great inflection points right now that we have to be able to continue to redefine the movement, not for what it is today, but for what it needs to be for our membership. And that's what these organizations, NAFCU, once again, thank you. Inclusiv, thank you. There are other partners, all of those that are listening, thank you. There's going to be more that we will have to do together. This is a conversation that doesn't stop today. Our learning, our pieces will continue this on. So please be open to walking this journey with us, because our members continue to walk their journey, and our responsibility is to be there for them.
Mm-hmm. This is just a start. So let's plug in, as Cathie was saying, and get involved and listen and learn and serve our communities, giving them the products and services that they need to be resilient, to withstand, whatever may come their way. All right. Well, thank you both, Cathie, Creighton, so much for joining me. Thank you to our listeners and viewers for tuning in to this really, really interesting discussion about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and what it means for your credit union and ways that you can get involved if you are interested in participating. So if you enjoy watching or listening to the CUPP, please subscribe, turn on your notifications to get updates about new episodes. Hit the like button and leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing and what you'd like to hear about on a future episode. We always love getting your feedback. Thanks so much, and until next time.